REI Co-op presents a perfect outdoor moment with the perfect gift. Picture this. You're ripping with your favorite person. Bluebird skies, blower powder, and frankly, you're skiing like legends.
So sick. Another lap?
Thanks to REI's curation, from lid to sticks, you nailed the gift.
No way. How'd you know?
Does it get more perfect than that? Give without guessing. Shop in store or visit rei.com.
Ford was built on the belief that the world doesn't get to decide what you're capable of. You do. So ask yourself, can you or can't you? Can you load up a Ford F-150 and build your dream with sweat and steel? Can you chase thrills and conquer curves in a Mustang? Can you take a Bronco to where the map ends and adventure begins? Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Ready, set, Ford.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about eldest sons. And so eldest daughters are talked about a lot in the popular media, but we really do not talk about eldest sons that much, which is unfortunate because, you know, as I say all the time, men are people, right? And sometimes that is forgotten in some of these discussions that, you know, a male child is going to suffer, possibly not in the exact same way, but though she won't suffer in exactly his same way, and they will both suffer in difficult situations. And before we get to that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was the cure versus management perspective on mental, physical illness and relationship issues, and how these are different in Western and non-Western cultures, with personal anecdote, which you always like, and 200 more episodes if you subscribe. More than that. Okay, so there's all this information out there now. It's really on trend to talk about eldest daughters and how difficult it is to be an eldest daughter, and they have a certain kind of personality, and they can be perfectionistic, and they can, you know, try to take care of the younger siblings similar to an adult, and even be like like a replacement partner. I have like a whole thing on people-pleasing daughters of people-pleasing parentified daughters of covertly narcissistic mothers. I mean, like, I literally have a podcast on it because it is so common and it's real. However, I did not have a podcast on eldest sons. I do have a workhorse podcast, so, you know, you might as well just replace that with this with that. I mean, there's a lot of overlap between the workhorse personality and the eldest son personality, but I'll tell you there's some differences based on the birth order, the same as it is for girls. So a girl who's the oldest daughter is very often her mother's confidant. And she could be the oldest daughter, and there could be boys in the house too. So that's another point, is like a lot of this is mediated by the personality type. And I'll get to that later. But men also, the eldest son is often the mom's confidant. And he could be the dad's confidant too, you know, and there's all these guys who I work with, because these eldest sons do tend to be very successful. And, you know, they are rule followers in many ways, even if they're introverts. And they do not want to get in trouble with the law or with anything. They build businesses, but they tend to stick by the rules and the conventions. They don't tend to be the ones who are criminals or who are doing things that are outside of the realm of what is okay. And they are perfectionistic at times. They can struggle with anxiety the same as the girls can. If you are used to an adult confiding in you and saying things like, you know, you got to take care of your siblings, they look up to you, well, then you get a certain perspective of yourself as a role model, and that's good in certain ways, and it's bad in other ways. And the more dysfunctional your family is, the worse it is, right? Because then you have a man who's expected to be the man of the house when he's 7. You know, and that's a huge burden. And so the eldest daughters in dysfunctional homes, they do a lot of cooking, cleaning, things like that, helping the siblings with their homework. And boys also, by the way, do a lot of that. They also make the sandwiches and make dinner and help with the homework and watch the kids. They also do. And they may not, you know, talk about it as much, but when they don't kind of say, they don't lead with that frequently the way that eldest daughters do in my practice, where they say, I was like the mother for all of them, for all my little siblings, or even just for one or multiple, whatever. And I did the cooking and I did the cleaning and blah, 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 blah. But if you ask the men, they do the same thing. They didn't identify it almost as like a core part of their personality, maybe because it goes against gender scripts. But if you ask, they were making dinner. If mom was drunk and dad wasn't there, guess who was making dinner? It was the oldest son, if there's an oldest son. And, and it's the oldest daughter if it's the oldest daughter. Now, sometimes based on the personality type, the middle becomes kind of like the oldest. Because let's say the oldest, I have situations where it's like the person acts like an oldest of either gender, and I'll be like, are you an oldest? And they're like, no, but it's interesting you say that. And it turns out that the oldest was into drugs or alcohol, or they left home very early, or they had some kind of, real bad mental health issue such that they could not be counted on by the younger siblings to buffer them from whatever dysfunction was going on by the parents in the home. So in that situation, the middle kind of turns into the oldest. But how do eldest sons differ from eldest daughters? Well, I've not heard somebody say basically, now you got to be the woman of the house. It is in a way like the way that many people, especially in prior generations, would say to a boy, you got to be the man of the house because your father isn't here. There's just a lot more single mother households where the guy just leaves, especially in previous generations where the dad just is not around, than the converse, where it's raised by a dad and the mother just isn't around. Women tend to stick more around with their children, and they always did. And so, especially in previous generations, that's not thought to be bad at all to say, you got to be the man of the house now. That was thought to be, like, if your dad is in combat and he dies, then the family says, well, you got to be the man of the house now. And then that's considered like an honor. But it's not an honor when you're like a little boy or an adolescent boy, because then you don't get to go out. You don't get to party. Your mother looks to you. It can be very dysfunctional, in a very dysfunctional way, like a surrogate husband, like literally, she's like, you have to put her to bed because she's drinking too much. You got to undress her and put her to bed. Right? There's that level, or there's just a level that she looks at you and you meet eyes when the other kids do something cute. That doesn't seem bad, right? And it's not, quote, bad, but it means that you're being treated as the other parent. So when a boy is treated by his mother as the man of the house, he's also, just to be blunt, he's in a sexless marriage. I mean, that's the truth. He is the father in that house and the husband in that house, basically. And by the way, the dad can be there too, but he could be depressed, he could be drunk, he could come in and out like he doesn't really live there type of thing, he could be cheating all the time, whatever the case may be, or he could be dead, or he could be abandoned them, or what have you. So he could be physically or emotionally absent. And so the boy, he's not able to do the things that boys would do. Instead, he has to kind of act like a man before his time, which means that he doesn't get to be a child, or he doesn't get to be an adolescent. He has to be the husband, but he's not having sex with his mother, right? So he's basically learning to be he's in a marriage. He's in a marriage with his mother, and they have children, and emotionally. And then and this isn't all of them, and I'll get to that soon, but if it is this kind of emotional incest dynamic, then he's in a sexless marriage. And guess what happens later on? Guess what he's drawn to? You'll never get sexless marriage. This is very common in the people that come in and work with sexless marriages with me, is they kind of got used to this dynamic to be basically emotionally married but not have sex. Because you don't have sex with your mother. Well, you do have sex with your wife, though. But if you are not used to that being part of the dynamic, then when you are expected to take care of a home and children, you did that already. You associate taking care of a home and children with being partnered with a suffering woman with whom you don't have sex. And that describes a lot of these marriages to a T, what these eldest sons of dysfunctional homes get into. Now, there's another rhetoric, which is just, eldest daughters tend to be more responsible and perfectionistic, but that's in a functional home. That's just a birth order thing. And that's true for the eldest sons. So in functional homes, right, where nobody's an alcoholic, both parents are there, or there's some good co-parenting dynamic where you still do see your dad, even if you got divorced, right, then the eldest son, he usually still is more responsible, more reliable, the one that the others look up to. But that could be great. That could be positive. That could really shape his character as a leader, as somebody who has confidence in himself, because he doesn't have to do that next dysfunctional level of becoming an adult. So he's still a child or an adolescent, but he's just kind of like top of the heap of the children. And does it come with more responsibility and less leeway from the parents? Certainly, because the parents are going for the first time through their life. They're parenting an adolescent for the first time. They're going to be stricter with the adolescent. They are going to have more, strict rules and expectations and all of this. But in a functional home, it is what it is. And the younger one frequently has their own problems, saying that by the time they were older, the parents were a little more checked out and they weren't as excited. The middle one always feels forgotten. These things, these birth order effects are real. They don't always feel forgotten. But you see my point. This is why these social media videos about birth order are so popular, because so many people resonate with them. It is different to be a middle child. It is different to be a youngest child. Most people identify with that, unless, as I said, they have a sibling who is struggling so mightily that they had to be almost like replaced in the hierarchy by the other children. But so in a functional home, sure, eldest sons and eldest daughters, with great power comes great responsibility. Like the parents are super invested in everything they do, but they are also more strict. They also have less leeway. They also exhort them to be more of a role model, which comes with pressure, different personality types, different sensitivity levels, have different issues. They're used to getting their way, higher rates of divorce in oldest children, the highest and only children, and then oldest, and down the line, it gets less and less likely to divorce because you're used to dealing with so many other people and their perspectives and not always being right when you're like the middle or the youngest. But anywho, the issue is eldest sons have their own problems and frequently were expected to act like a man before their time. They frequently get into romantic relationships before their peers. And if it's a dysfunctional relationship where their mother is looking at them to be a husband, basically emotionally, then that is too intense. Just like it is for eldest daughters to be their mother's best friend. Like, you're not supposed to be the best friend or the spouse of an adult. That is way too intense and a lot of pressure. And it ends up with you kind of distrusting intimacy because intimacy is overwhelming and it was given to you before you were ready in a form that was not palatable for you given your developmental stage, that was overly intense given what other children and your peers were getting. So the eldest son frequently says, well, I had to get a job, because I had to contribute. And so I wasn't able to do baseball or I wasn't able to do sports because of this and that. And again, that's in more of a dysfunctional setup. But that's what's going to resonate with a lot of the people listening to this, unfortunately, is adult children of dysfunctional homes, And so if you have to be a man starting at like 12 years old, guess what? Also, your midlife crisis is going to be fairly elaborate. That is really going to be intense because unlike other people who started adulthood, maybe their mid-20s, now more like 30, you started at before you had pubic hair. Guess what? You're going to be tapped out by the time you hit midlife. You're going to feel like you lived 3 lives. And you're going to say, when do I get to have fun? And so these guys often are the ones who have a pretty bad midlife crisis where they say, am I going to go through my whole life having to act like everybody's more important than me and everybody's needs come first? And this is where you see there's the overlap with the workhorse, with the workhorse idea. So eldest sons should really not be left out of this discourse, and they have their own issues, and the middle child has issues. I saw the funniest TikTok where it said, because people are having less children now, middle children are going extinct. And the person said, isn't that the most middle child thing ever? But, so middle children have problems, youngest children have problems, but the eldest is closest usually to the heart of the problems. They know more about the financial issues. They're sometimes confided in about the sexual issues. They're basically treated like a demi-adult. And sometimes, by the way, when the mother is MIA, then it's kind of this mini wife thing for girls. I just want to add that in because I said like the girl becomes her mother's best friend and the guy becomes, the son becomes the mother's surrogate spouse. But sometimes the mother isn't there, more rarely. In that case, the girl, the eldest, can become the mini wife, which is just as, dysfunctional to the dad. And then the son can become almost in like a surrogate, almost like the dad sometimes goes out, he does his own thing, he's dating, he's this and that. Guess who's home watching the little siblings? It's the eldest son or daughter. And by the way, the eldest son frequently has more resentment to an emotionally or physically absent father than the younger children because he's the one that all the shit fell on more than the younger children who we tried to insulate. So the eldest son, frequently, that's a lot of work and therapy, is frequently unexplored or tamped down anger and resentment at the father, saying, where the fuck were you? I had to take over your role, so I did not get to do, I didn't get to have a normal life. And this could even be if the father's dead, It could be even if the father's dead and they were killed in an accident, there's still resentment and sadness and bitterness and grief. And of course, if the father opted to leave, then there's a lot of that as well. But it's even if it seemed like, okay, the guy has mental illness, the guy has addiction, but there's still these complicated feelings like, well, if he had somehow magically not had that, then I would have had a childhood. So anyway, I hope that this made you think. And again, as always, you can reach out to us for therapy or coaching at Best Life Behavioral Health. All right, thanks, and have a great
Extra value meals are back. For just $5, get a savory and sweet sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddles, plus hash browns and a coffee. Only at McDonald's.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
day, guys.